Hi ladies, it's Hillary, owner of Free Babes Handmade and blogger at I'mLikeBrave.com, a blog all about living an uncommon life that you love with your family through entrepreneurship. I personally love having one-on-one coffee dates with other entrepreneurs that I admire, and so I thought it'd be really fun to start a weekly series where I get to interview creative entrepreneurs and you get to listen in. From these interviews, you will learn from their successes and their failures, get behind-the-scenes access to see how they built their business, and you'll walk away with valuable insights that will help you take your business to the next level. So grab a cup of coffee and join the conversation. Enjoy! All right, hi guys, this is Hillary with I'm Like Brave, and I'm so excited to be interviewing Jahje Ives, owner of Baby Jives, and she and her team make the most adorable, whimsical baby mobiles. I'm sure you've seen them, the clouds with the stars and the moons and a ton of other ones. And so thank you for being with us today, Jahje.
Thank you for having me, Hillary.
Yeah.
I'm excited to talk to you.
Yeah, and so before we get into all the business questions, tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Sure. So I am a mother of two, and my kid, well, actually, my oldest child was actually the inspiration, and he's the name behind the business. When I was pregnant with him, we didn't know it was a boy or a girl, and we started setting up our nursery, and it was almost impossible to find anything that wasn't plastic, wasn't horribly tacky. And so I made a mobile for him, and that was 6.5 years ago. And since then, everything's happened. And we just moved. We've lived in Philadelphia. The first house we had was right in the city, and we just moved to a little bit outside of the Philadelphia. So I'm a mom, two kids, raising my kids out in Philadelphia, and my studio is in my home, and I would show you a tour of it, but it's apparently a no Wi-Fi zone.
I know. So just so you guys watching know, when we first started the video, it was like the cutest setup with the thread and everything. And so unfortunately the video was freezing, so we had to find this beautiful tree and window.
That's my jungle.
Yeah. And you said it's a farmhouse. You just purchased a farmhouse. And
yeah. It's a farmhouse from 1851. It's an old fieldstone farmhouse that it feels totally out of place because it is literally right outside of the Philadelphia area.
Uh-huh.
I don't have a farm or anything anymore. The only animals are my children. But it used to be owned by an artist previously, and he essentially built an almost 1,000 square foot addition right out the wing of the farmhouse, and so that's what my studio is in. So we found it this summer, and it was just like the perfect place because I was previously in I want to say 500 square feet studio, which sounds big, but it really cramped in there, and I had just outgrown it, and so we found this place, and we bought it before we sold our other house, which is a little scary, but
no, I'm seriously like drooling though. That's like everyone's dream, like an old farmhouse. It has a build out for your studio. Like, oh my gosh.
It's really like my husband and I come home every night and go, pinch us.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm so happy to hear that. And I'm sure like a big part of it was your business, right?
A big part of it was my business. Yeah. I mean, a third of the house is dedicated to my business. So one of the things that is most important to me, I've always wanted my studio in my home. I have two young children, but I needed more separation because previously I was in a separate bedroom, the extra bedroom that every mother starts their business out of, sometimes runs their business out of for almost 5 years. I was in that. But it was just the point where it was either I was going to have to rent a space outside of my home, but I just really didn't want to do that because I love being here. They're both in school during the day now, but, this way I get to be involved in their lives. Their playroom is right outside my studio, and they run in and out of my studio all day long. The only reason they're not running in and out of the frames right now is my mom took them so we could talk.
That's great. So what were you doing before Baby Jives?
So before Baby Jive started, I was working as a professor. I was an adjunct professor at Tyler School of Art teaching video and drawing. I have my BFA in crafts. which people always are like, is that a real thing? But it actually is.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I studied woodworking, metalsmithing, and fibers. And then I have my MFA in painting and sculpture.
Wow.
So I'm an educated artist.
Mm-hmm.
And I was teaching as an adjunct professor, and then I got pregnant, and they wanted to keep me, but I told them that I wasn't into doing a performance art class because my son was literally to the first day of classes, and he was born late, but it would have been awkward. So I stopped that, and with the goal of figuring out how to stay home with him.
Uh-huh.
And like I said, I had made a mobile for him when I was in my nesting phase, and people kept coming over and asking about it. And finally I figured, hey, there's this thing called Etsy. Maybe I'll open up a shop. And that was 5.5 years ago. And that's kind of how the whole thing started.
That is so cool. And I know I told you when I saw you in New York that like when you first made mobiles and Pinterest first started, when my daughter was born, I saw like mobile on Pinterest and I was like, oh, cool. Maybe I'll try to make one that's like not tacky. And so I tried to make one with like clouds, and it's like, I still have it in my house. That was like my first official craft inspired by you. Not nearly as good as you, but it's so cool that like 5 years later we're talking and you have a business and, you know.
That's awesome. Yeah, and it's funny. It's like when I do shows and stuff, I'll oftentimes meet people who will be like, "Oh my gosh, I love your stuff. I've seen it on Pinterest," or to me that's sort of exciting. It's like I think my business started, and then shortly after Pinterest started.
Uh-huh.
Just like I think a lot of it like ballooned from there.
Yeah, totally.
Totally. Like people could visually plan off the internet what they wanted to do.
Uh-huh.
And also people's tastes, I think, for, like stuffed, like the little dangly, like carousel, I don't know, those plastic mobiles that you used to get at the store.
Yeah.
I think people kind of realize that's not what we want.
Uh-huh.
Basically, started decorating nurseries for themselves. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah, that's awesome. And you were a big part of that. That's so cool. So what did your first year of growth look like? And kind of like, can you walk us through a timeline of what it's looked like for you growing baby Jives?
Yeah. So, like I said, my son was 6.5, or my son is 6.5. My business is 5.5 years. So do the math. He was a year old when I started my business because he finally started sleeping. So I had this idea for the mobiles, from before he was born. I registered my Etsy site. Actually, if you look at my Etsy site, it says that I started in 2009, but that was when I registered my site. I didn't do it until a year later because I had to get my son sleeping through the night. He was a terrible sleeper. But then I got about 6 products together, 3 different mobile styles, took photographs of them, and built my Etsy shop. Honestly, I just launched with 6 items in there, which seems crazy considering now I have like a catalog of, 300 plus items. But I just knew that if I didn't start, I'd always keep putting it off.
Uh-huh.
And so I just launched with 6 items, and they're really good photographs. That was my main thing. There's so many vendors on Etsy that you really have to stand out, and photography is the way you have to stand out. And a week later, I had my first sale, and it was so exciting. And then I had to figure out how to package my stuff.
I bet that's funny thinking how you packaged it the first couple times.
Yeah, it was a learning experience. It was sort of like, because they bought one of my 5-bird mobiles, which are like the biggest, most, they're made with real twigs that are wrapped in yarn, and they have fabric birds perched on them. And I thought, well, this is great to hand deliver in town, but how am I going to ship this to Colorado? So I figured that out. And that was my first sale, and like a few days later I had another sale, and by the end of the month I realized it was a viable business, and I just started was just working with my sewing machine in that extra bedroom that I had set aside for myself. And during nap time and bedtime, that's when I made stuff and I photographed stuff. And one of the things that I learned was when I first started, everything was different. And I quickly streamlined that so you don't have to photograph the same, you don't have to photograph your item every single time you want to post it. Then it was just a learning process from there. And by the end of the first year, in that first year, was making as much as I had before as an adjunct professor.
Wow, awesome.
And staying home with my son and, still getting to take him to the playground. And granted, I was exhausted because I was being a full-time mom day, and then he would go to bed and I'd work for 4 hours after bedtime. But for me, it was absolutely worth it to be with him. And instead of, paying someone to watch him and going to a job, I was staying home with him. And, that was why I had started my business.
Awesome. And so how many people do you have on your team now?
So now I have an interesting team. I work with a manufacturer now for some of my most popular items, like the white clouds with gold stars that I got to a point last year where I absolutely could not keep them in stock. I had a 4-week wait period for them. I did, at that point, I was employing 2 women locally from my community as seamstresses to sew clouds at home, and then they would bring me back the clouds, and then I'd assemble them. But it was pretty obvious from the amount of exhaustion on my part and the backlog of orders that I needed to scale up. So I still employ those 2 independent seamstresses to sew from their own homes for me. They do more special projects now.
Okay.
And I come out with limited edition items and things like that. And then I found one night I was exhausted, I was frustrated, and I was crying, sitting on the couch with my computer and saying to my husband, I need to find a manufacturer. And I had actually met with 2 different, larger cut and sew operations. And both of them have basically said, you're too small. We can't help you. We can't do the runs that you need. We can't. Also, my items are very hand intensive. And they just said, we can't accommodate the handwork that's needed for your designs. And so I got on Craigslist and I typed in cut and sew manufacturer in the Philadelphia region. And I found a little company that is about an hour from my house that was just starting out at the time. I emailed them. The next morning, I had an email back from the person who runs the company saying, we would love to meet with you. This sounds like a really exciting project. We looked at your website. We love what you do. Let's meet. And and so that was last spring, and we met. They had their then, I think she was 4-month-old daughter at the business meeting. It was like the husband, the wife, and the daughter. And I just thought, there's a baby at my business meeting. This is obviously going to work out.
That is so awesome, because I just love that it kind of fell into your lap. Well, I'm sure it didn't fall into your lap because you had a lot of...
To my prayers. I was like, please, I can no longer do this and keep sane.
Yeah, that is great. And that is what has allowed you to... I'm kind of jumping out of order, but you want to share that exciting thing that's happened this year?
Which is I was invited to go to the Etsy open call up in New York, where I met with I think it was 5 or 6 different big retailers, one of whom was Land of Nod, and they decided they wanted to work with me, which was amazing and has been amazing. I actually just shipped out my order to them last week. It was the biggest wholesale order I've ever done. And it was the biggest excitement and frustration that I've ever dealt with. It was like, be careful what you wish for. Ultimately, I'm thrilled to be working with them, but it was a huge learning experience.
Yeah.
I kept telling people, I feel like I'm putting on my big girl pants.
Yeah, it's like big time. And when do they come out?
They're online now,
Oh,
actually.
sweet. Okay.
Different items. The Lux Cloud in white with gold stars, which I think you have one of those.
I do. It's hanging up, yeah.
And they chose the steel gray moon with Lux stars, silver Lux stars underneath it, which is the Luxes are my metallic leather.
Awesome. That is so exciting.
Yeah. So yeah, you can find them online at Land of Nod now for the holiday season, and hopefully, if all goes well, beyond that.
Yeah. Well, that's seriously so great. Congratulations. I've already told you that, but again. So what is ultimately like the blog I'm Like Brave is all about women leading lives they love through their business. So what lifestyle goals do you have, and what type of life are you able to have through Baby Jives?
So I think I was talking a little bit about this, but for me, one of the main things that I want to be is creative, so present for my family and my children. And that's kind of why I created my company, because I wanted something that would feed the creative part of me, which is the making of these mobiles, which are, essentially, I'm still making sculpture. Which before I started my company, I was a painter and a sculptor. And now I'm doing sculpture, but it's a little more functional. And a little more accessible in terms of price points. Anyone can, most people can afford something in the range of what I make. Before that, my sculptures were going for like hundreds of dollars, if not thousands. So
cool.
But yeah, that connection between having a business that you're passionate about and following that passion, but also having your family involved, which I think is a core of what my business is about, is that idea of I like childhood and inspiring wonder. Like my tagline for my business is inspire wonder. And that's something that whenever I'm creating a new item, or even just thinking about how I'm going to approach something, I think about that aspect of wonder, and how that's something that is so present in childhood. And then as adults, I think we maybe lose sight of it a little. And our children bring it back into our lives, because we always say you get to experience it through the eyes of a child. And so, yeah, inspiring wonder is like it's my catchphrase, and it also is my operating principle for, my business and my life.
Awesome. And it's truly a gift to be in the kids industry, because you do get to kind of remain a child in a good way, and like just have that inspiration and creativity around you all the time.
Exactly. Yeah, no, I love being part, and I think you get to be really creative, and crazy ideas aren't so crazy in the kids industry.
Yeah, totally. So what's been your biggest failure or hurdle that you've experienced so far in your business, and can you tell us a little bit more about that and what you've learned from it?
Well, I think because maybe I just finished it, the biggest hurdle that I've encountered yet in my business has been scaling up for Land of Nod. The giant leap of paperwork that comes with working with small wholesale accounts to a wholesale account is huge. Honestly, I feel like half of that order was just navigating the system.
Wow.
As a small independent, let's face it, a micro business, working with a giant retailer that is used to working with giant businesses, you have to learn everything. And it's like their manual, I got a manual to process my order. It was a 100-page manual I had to read through, and there was information I needed to know on every single page.
Wow.
So that was I feel like it was the biggest learning experience I've encountered, but I feel like it was super painful. And I did have a breakdown and cry at one point. I don't cry all the time, but when I'm really frustrated, I do. And I usually cry right before things start going right. So, it all works out.
Yeah.
It's like go before you can get on with it. But I feel like now when that next big retailer comes to me, I'm going to know the game a lot more.
Yeah.
Know what's required of me when they hand me their 200-page compliance thing, because actually I know Nordstrom, another friend of mine is working with Nordstrom right now, and he's like, there's 200 pages to read, so 100 pages sounds pretty good to me now. But yeah, that growth, I mean, scaling up from being a small business to a small business that's dealing with larger businesses is, we all think it's the dream, and it is. It's amazing to have my products at Land of Nod. I'm thrilled about that. But getting there, the behind the scenes is really complex.
Yeah, I bet. And yeah, it's just awesome that it's been such a learning experience, because you do know next time, like you're now like seasoned with working with big retailers.
Exactly. Seasoned. I'm like semi-seasoned.
Yeah. Awesome. And can you talk a little bit about, this isn't one of the questions, but I also know you were recently asked to be on the panel in New York for Etsy.
Oh, yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about that, and also like your structure of selling a little bit on Etsy and on your own site, and how you navigated like, getting them to okay your manufacturing for some of your products?
Well, yeah, so I, about 3 years ago, actually, I started my own site because I realized that I actually had a very specific incident where I had been at a show and I had given someone a card, and it went to my Etsy site, and I didn't hear anything from them. And a month later, they contacted me via Etsy and said, "Oh, we just love the mobile we purchased from you." And I thought, I didn't sell you a mobile. And so what had happened is they'd gone to Etsy and they searched within what they thought was my website and navigated off my site and purchased from a different Etsy seller.
Oh.
Yeah. And so I thought, well, I did a lot of work to make that relationship, and they went straight to Etsy after they had met me out in the public.
Uh-huh.
And they bought from someone else, and that's pretty disappointing.
Yeah.
So that's when I thought, okay, I love Etsy. I love what they do for sellers. I love the fact that anyone can start a business there, but maybe it's time for me to have my own site. And so that's when I started babyjives.com, which is my own site, and I started pushing all my marketing efforts there because I figured I'm doing all that legwork. I don't want them to go to Etsy and navigate off of me.
Uh-huh.
So now, that was 3 years ago. Now, actually, just the other night, I looked at my stats, and this year, I'm on target for 30% of my business to be on Etsy and 70% of my business to be on my own site.
Cool. Okay.
Which is great. And the reason I'm still on Etsy is I still really value Etsy as a platform. I love the community there, and also a lot of retailers look for people on Etsy. A lot of magazines, honestly, look through Etsy. I've been featured in Pregnancy and Newborn magazine twice now, and both times they've come to me through Etsy.
Wow, cool.
Yeah, and so I find it really valuable. I look at Etsy as almost like my other advertising strategy, where I keep a limited portion of my line on Etsy. I don't offer every single item that I make, but what I do offer on there are my best sellers, or my key. And the other thing, I've been on Etsy for 5 years now. I've come to know, I think in the past like year or two, before they changed the structure of the front page, I was very active on a lot of teams on Etsy, and that's actually, we were talking about business advice and who do you go to. The teams on Etsy were amazing. I met some of my most valuable friends for business advice through those teams, who I still talk to. not on Etsy. Like we text each other now, and I have like my ladies round table.
Cool. Yeah.
um, and but I guess by being on those teams, I started to know some of the administrators in Etsy and come to come to know them. And and in the past couple months, I've been invited to a bunch of events at Etsy, one of which was a roundtable with the U.S. Secretary of Commerce, Penny Pritzker. And that was pretty amazing, getting to sit in on that. And she essentially was meeting with a handful of sellers that Etsy had invited to speak on concerns about micro businesses and our growth concerns and our concerns for commerce. One of the things that we really addressed with her, which I'm hoping they'll make more, they'll get more across, is tariffs, and how it is so hard when you get that order, the single order on Etsy that's going to Germany, and you get the question, sometimes you get the question, okay, well, what am I going to have to pay in tariffs to import this? And you have no idea. Or you don't get that question, and then you get the angry email a month later saying, I had to pay $10 before I could pick up my order because they charged me the tariff for my country. And you go, well, it says in my policies that I'm not responsible for that. And I also know how to figure out what your country is going to be, because every single country is different. So one of the things that we were saying it would be great is they could have like a universal database where we could go and figure those things out. So fingers crossed, Obama will get it done.
Yeah, that's just so cool to me that you are being able to network with people like that and serve as a voice for micro business and really just get to like talk about these things and ways to make Etsy better. Like, it's really cool.
It's really great. That's what I found in the past month. Like, I've been talking to some members of Etsy's PR team as they grow their wholesale arm of Etsy, the Etsy wholesale program. And I love that, I think when you start out on Etsy, you think of the administrators as like this, oh my gosh, I don't want to get shut down by the admin, or you're kind of, but they're amazing. And there's just been this, becoming, I feel like it's in the past, like half a year, it's been really great that they really want to know how they can improve Etsy. And they've been, calling me, like actually I was on a phone call this morning. And it's really wonderful to be able to say, hey, it would be really great if you guys could consider how hard this is for us as sellers, and, it's just, it's so, actually, I didn't even talk about this, but last month they had a manufacturing summit up in New York, that when Etsy launched their database of manufacturers. I don't know if anybody even knows about that.
No, I didn't know about that.
There is an online database now on Etsy that you can search locally. I know, write it down. There's an online searchable database of manufacturers who have been vetted through Etsy that you can work with, and who are excited to work with smaller businesses.
This is huge.
It's huge, yeah. It launched, I feel like 2 weeks ago. My timeline this fall has been a blur. I've been traveling so much, it's out of control. But yeah, I went up to New York they did a Reimagining Manufacturing was the summit. Wow. And they had Etsy sellers there, they had manufacturers, but ultimately, yeah, you can now search on Etsy to find a manufacturing partner. This
is so great because, I'm on Maker's Row, but it's still geared more towards apparel and like your baby mobiles and making bows. There's a very handcrafted nature to them that is beyond just machinery and people sewing. So
exactly, your picture's on there, Hillary.
I'm so excited. Okay,
it's like Maker's Row, but for Etsy people.
Wow.
There's even Etsy sellers who are on there as manufacturers because they have a workshop.
Yeah.
big enough that they can accommodate doing other people's work as well.
Yeah, this is
Which
actually something Rachel of Briar Handmaiden and I have texted back and forth about. Like, wouldn't it be great if there was a kind of like a co-op of local seamstresses that knew like the handcrafted nature, and they could be like a blend between a cut and sew like type deal and like crafting things for you. And this sounds like what Etsy's already been working on. So
That's kind of what they've been working on. And actually I think in Portland, there's a shop that started out like that essentially is that. They've gathered up a bunch of local seamstresses and started to cut and sew that independent designers and people who have more hand quality needs can go.
Wow, how cool. All right. Well, that's super exciting. That is a gold nugget of knowledge from this interview that everyone's going to benefit from. So thank you for sharing. So tell us a little bit about backtrack. I have one more question. So you sell on Etsy and your own site. What do you use to manage your inventory?
So for my inventory, I'm kind of terrible. I'm kind of terrible. For shipping and for managing my orders, that's easy. I actually use ShipStation because I have a Shopify account and Etsy. You can integrate it all there.
Sure.
I adore ShipStation. It makes my life much easier. But for my actual physical inventory management, well, a lot of my stuff up until recently has been made on order.
Okay.
So it hasn't been as much of an issue, but now that I do have physical inventory in stock, I honestly have a pad. Like I have tick marks.
All right.
More pro than that, but it's going to become Excel eventually, but
okay. Well, because
process of hiring a studio manager, so that's
awesome.
She's going to manage me.
That is so great because there's I tried out Ordoro at first, which is like a ShipStation that does the inventory, but there's just some glitches still there, so it wasn't quite working. So now I'm doing ShipStation, and inventory is still I just moved off Etsy. I want to go back on Etsy, but all of my stuff is pre-made, not made to order. So I'm trying to figure out how I can work out listing the accurate amounts on both sites and managing that.
Exactly. What I do for that between Etsy and my own site is that I honestly just based on the percentages of sales that I know I do, I can split the inventory.
Okay.
So that if it sells out on Etsy, it's on my own site. And if I see something getting low, I'll restock it on the site that needs it and pull from the other site.
Cool. Okay.
Not the best one, but it works.
Yeah. So what would you say are your biggest business strengths as an entrepreneur? And if you were to teach us a college course on entrepreneurship, what would you teach us?
So I would say my biggest strength is definitely marketing.
Okay.
And it's funny, I've had multiple assistants who have been launching their own businesses as they're working with me. And I feel like I almost, while we're sitting in there working, will provide tutorials on how to market their business, how to build their business. And one of my assistants has built a really successful business now. She moved to New Mexico and is completely self-supporting and living her dream. And it is, I feel like a proud mom. She is making these beautiful handmade dolls, and her name is Aaliyah, and her business is Aaliyah Grace Dolls. And she started with these fish eye pillows that she still makes that are lavender eye pillows that look like you're laying a fish on your face.
Oh, yeah.
They're hilarious. And then now she's doing that plus the handmade dolls. But we've had numerous conversations. Actually, she just texted me this morning. We still text back and forth. She'll be like, she was getting ready to list some dolls, and she wanted me to read over the listing text. And, so yeah, marketing and, how to sort of craft an entire business identity.
Yeah.
That's definitely one of my strengths, because I am really specific about knowing what is my business and what is not my business. And I think that's one of the things when you see people, a lot of times when I see people who are just starting out, they're trying a little bit of everything.
Mm-hmm.
And, I always say, what's the thing you're most passionate about? What's the thing that people react to most? Go with that and ditch everything else.
Mm-hmm.
Like, really know yourself and make every choice a really specific choice, like know who you are and don't be afraid to say, no, that's not me.
Yeah, that's great advice. It just sounds like also like slow and steady and be discerning with what is your business, especially now that we do have so many handmade shops all around us. It is so important to not just be your product, but be a business and a brand.
Yeah.
And yeah.
I think that's exactly it. It's like you have to, there's so many people out there. In order to stand out, you really have to have a specific voice and style and look. Like I can tell right on the back of right behind you have one of Stacy's prints.
Yeah.
Got such a specific style,
Yeah.
And like the other day I was scrolling through my Instagram and I saw someone wearing one of your bows because I was like, oh, look, I totally know. And then sure enough, it was one of yours.
Oh, cool. Well, thank you. Because I'm actually a spaz. And that's my weakness is I always joke with other people about it. I'm not discerning. Like the other day I hosted like a huge Taylor Swift loop on my page because I was like, why not? But I know in my mind what my brand and my vision is. And then I just I veer from it and I'm like, okay, I remember. And then I veer.
I feel like everybody does that. I mean, there's days where I'm like, oh, why did I post that? That's so not on brand. And it later, but for right now, it's there.
Yeah, there's a good level, and this is a really great question. By the way, this interview is way longer than normal, but I'm loving talking to you. It is a good question lately, between building your brand and then how you use Instagram, because I feel like Instagram should be used to build your brand, but there's also the piece that should be used to give the behind the scenes, and it's how, if you really develop a set aesthetic, but then you really want to still be that mom showing your children, showing the journey, how do you blend the two? It's kind of, it used to be just blend it, but now it really is becoming is it a visual catalog or is it a behind the scenes?
I feel like you just plucked that question from my head.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like that is the question of the moment because Instagram has changed a lot in the past, even in the past 6 months, even in the past month.
Yeah.
Since instituted the whole thing with if you follow over 200 people, Instagram is now choosing who you see based on your interactions. Did you know that?
Yes. I didn't know the number was over 200 people.
200 people. If you follow over 200 people, Instagram is now, it's like Facebook. Where they say, oh, well, they constantly like this person's stuff, so they want to keep seeing it. Or they never like this person's stuff, so they obviously don't want to see it. And so, I think as a brand where a lot of us, Instagram has been our biggest marketing platform. The golden age is gone, but you still want to be authentic. And I think that when I talk to people who are on Instagram as just not as makers or marketers, but just as, people, that I find from them that they like following brands the most where they feel like they get to know them.
Yeah.
And so I think just keeping in mind what your aesthetic is. For me, I still show my kids, but I don't show them all the time. I'm not going to show every single picture, but I try to find the things that are, I hate to say it, but on brand for me. In terms of inspire wonder, like the magic of childhood. Also, as a mom and a parent, the days when your kids drive you absolutely batty and do something like the other day when my daughter was in the studio and painted her entire face. I'm going to Instagram that. I'm just going to Instagram that because every mom out there, every parent out there can relate to that when you that your child a project and they're so focused and all of a sudden you look over and you're like, oh God, that went horribly awry. So I think, instead of sharing, I never share the memes or anything like that. or I can't even say it right.
I don't know. I say meme. Is it meme? I don't know.
But I never show those. I more share like the outrageous moments from my life because my kids are crazy and do stuff like, especially my daughter. She really. And so, yeah, I try to give people a glimpse that I'm not just a brand because honestly, I find it would be really boring if you just saw my stuff all the time. I don't know. Yeah, but I feel like just seeing pictures of my stuff all the time, you'd be like, and we're done.
Yeah. Well, that's a good answer. Just like going with the flow and recognizing it is changing. And how do you like approach the new change with the blend between your brand and your family? And like what you said, like just choosing things that are, I don't know, it's hard to say like choose family moments that are on brand, but I know what you mean. Like,
but I feel like things that resonate with the core of who you are.
yes.
And that are universal.
Yeah.
You don't share, inside joke or awkward pictures of your children that are doing inappropriate things. Obviously, painting your face is one thing, but I would never show a picture of my child like in anything that at age 16 she would be mortified by.
Yeah.
Off Instagram.
Yes.
Also, then having your aesthetic set.
Uh-huh.
Knowing, when you look at those little squares, what does your aesthetic look like? If everything looks like a mishmash, also bad lighting, like, if you're has bad lighting, just trash it.
Yeah. Well, and it's becoming more as Instagram's growing, your little square is becoming a lot more valuable. So basically you should put a lot of thought into, it's real estate on there, like what you put on there and what you don't.
Exactly.
Yes. Okay. So what are you most excited about for the future of Baby Jives right now?
I am most excited to finally, now that I've found a manufacturer to take up some of the production slack on my mobiles, to make new products that are not mobiles. It's coming.
Wow, that's exciting.
Yeah, I've been, honestly, for like 2 years, I've had ideas that I just keep jotting down, and I have not had time to jump into production on them. And then this summer, I took 2 months off.
Uh-huh.
And then decided to move houses. So that, I specifically was going to take off July and August to do new production work and develop a new line, and then we moved our whole house. So that didn't happen.
Cool. That's really exciting, though. Can you tell us at all anything about these new products?
Yeah. Well, I've been doing little glimpses. So my husband is a painter, and he paints these really great, almost like portraits of animals. And so we're working towards a line of prints and pillows featuring his stuff because he's Jahje Ives, so he's also a Jives. I'm also married to him, so he can be part of the brand. And so so we're looking to in the spring launch a line of prints and pillows with his stuff, and then I'm working on swaddling blankets finally.
Awesome.
I have been going towards it, but with all of my own fabrics and that sort of thing. And yeah, I think I'm publicly accountable now.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Spring, summer for that.
Cool. That's really exciting. So just expanding your brand.
Exactly. I mean, it sounds crazy that I've been doing mobiles for 5 years, and built a business that just really does mobiles. I mean, I have art prints and I have like a pillow, but I've never been. I always get too busy when I'm in the midst of designing, and so I'm gonna expand the Baby Jives empire.
And are you gonna plan on doing all of these things, like starting it with manufacturing?
I'm going. It's actually going to be a 50-50. So yes. Are going to be started just with manufacturing. Others are going to be started in my studio, but then move to manufacturing, like the fabric. I want to set it up. That actually, I want to do a little bit of handwork that's going to be done in the studio first before it goes. But I'm not going to be sewing the blankets themselves. But I'm going to be doing textile design myself.
Cool.
And the textile thing.
That's so exciting. Well, we can't wait to follow along and see. Awesome. So, what advice? Well, first of all, before we ask the last question, where can we find you online? Where would you like to be found, and where can
Well,
people ask you questions?
at Etsy, you can find me. My Etsy shop is Baby Jives Co. On Etsy, and then, but my primary platform is www.babyjives.com.
Okay.
I guess you don't need to WW anymore. Oh my God. And then on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, Pinterest, you can find me at Baby Jives.
Awesome. Okay, and then the last question is, what advice do you have for other entrepreneurs out there watching, and for other moms and women who are thinking about starting a business?
For moms and women who are thinking about starting a business, I would say baby steps. You will get so frustrated because you think that you have to do it all at once, but just allowing yourself to do a little bit each day and realizing there's going to be days when everything goes wrong and you don't get anything done, and that's okay. Things are going to take twice as long as you think it will. Like I said, I've been trying to do this new product line for 2 years, and it's taking forever. But I would say, be persistent, and it sounds so cliche, but don't give up. Like, if you have a dream and you have a passion, then let that passion fuel what you're doing, and you'll get there. It might not be as fast as you want, but and then once you get there, you'll be surprised at how fast things will grow if you're creating from passion. Awesome. I think that's the biggest thing, for starting a business, is make sure that what you're doing, you absolutely love it, because if you're successful, you're going to be doing it 80 hours a week.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great advice. So thank you again for all of the wonderful wisdom you shared with us, and for being, just real and sharing the behind the scenes of how you've built your business. I know all of us have appreciated it. And if you guys do have any other questions for Jahje and you want to leave comments on the blog post, I'll make sure to connect you all. And so thank you for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, and I hope you guys all out there have learned at least one thing you can incorporate in your business, and have an awesome week. Bye.